So,
what's happening, everybody, and welcome to the debut episode of Weekly Top 5's from Library Chess Productions. And what this is exactly what it says it is. It's Top 5's, and this is something that Tyler and I have been doing with each other for most of our friendship. Like, I think we would just periodically look at each other and go, top 5 world capitals. That's a really bad example, but top 5 whatevers. And we would have to endeavor to not only come up with our top 5, but place them accordingly. And this is going to be basically our quote unquote, and I'm putting air quotes around this. This is basically going to be our guaranteed piece of content once a week. That's the purpose that this really serves, is this is something really easy for us to record and something that guarantees that we're going to have a piece of content periodically that you can basically bank that you're going to get. And I'm putting all kinds of conditionals on this, but this is the one that we're doing to make sure that we've got a piece of content as frequently as possible. This is the debut episode of Top 5's, and it's a good one. Did I just make a promise that we can't keep? I don't know. You're going to have to watch the video and find out. So the debut episode of Weekly Top 5's is going to be a big one, and it is top 5 movies of all time. I would argue that this is probably the most difficult list to make, just in terms of, I know it was for me, because making this list, I felt like I was sacrificing one child for another. Because, I mean, we watch so much every year, and every year I think we probably run into that one movie that's just like, man, is this one of my favorite movies of all time? At least one.
we'll rely so heavily on movie talk and whatnot that this kind of sets the standard of, these are our top 5 movies, this is where we're coming from.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, if you're watching videos months ahead of time and we're talking about stuff and it's like the first video of ours that you come across and you're like, I wonder who these guys really are. You go back and you watch this video, and at the foundation, this is who we really are. So the way top 5's are going to work, we're going to start at the bottom, go to the top. So we each start with number 5, and it's a back and forth. If you've ever watched us do movie awards or anything of the sort, you know how we do lists. 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. Start at the bottom, go all the way up to number 1. Should also point out, no honorable mentions. We're making this as hard and strict on ourselves as we possibly can. No honorable mentions. It's 5 and 5 only. That's the challenge.
So my number 5 is a movie called Stalker by the great and legendary Andrei Tarkovsky, probably the best Russian director of all time. And I won't go too much into the plot because you should just watch it. But basically it's a dystopian movie, a lot of long shots because that's what he's known for. Really poetic, philosophical, beautiful, things that can be said about pretty much any Tarkovsky movie that I've seen. And because this is a foreign movie, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because there will certainly be a lot of people who have seen it, but then a lot of people who haven't. But yeah, my number 5 is Stalker.
And this is just 2 very quick things I want to point out before we move on. Watch foreign movies.
Yes.
Just don't. I hate the criticism of I don't want to read my movies. I get it. I get where it comes from, but it's lazy, and stop being lazy with movies. And number 2, like Tyler mentioned, the long shot technique that Tarkovsky is famous for. And that's something that we shamelessly stole on something that no one else has ever seen. Who knows? We may wind up stealing it again at some point. But always with a tip of the hat to Tarkovsky for that filming style.
And it's amazing to me that in Russia, when he was alive, he was basically making blockbusters, like, you know, not in the same sense of like superhero movies, but he was making movies that made a fair bit of money in Russia. But you would never see a movie like that get really famous here because nobody's going to watch like a shot that's 2 minutes long.
Right. My number 5, best movie of all time, or favorite movie of all time, or whatever you want to call it, is Rocky Balboa. 2006 or 2008?
I think it's 6.
I think it was 6,
no, it was 6.
So this would be Rocky 6 in 2006, which is, I don't know if that's ironic or clever or maybe just total coincidence. It's easily my favorite Rocky movie, and this is, you know, coming after the one that most people would consider to have been the worst. in the series, and then you have like a 20-year break, or it's a pretty.
It was quite a
while, like quite a long break between Rocky V and what is Rocky VI, and it's him getting back into the fight game, and I absolutely love Antonio Tarver as Mason the Line Dixon. He's so good. Yep. And for somebody that's like not really an actor, actually not an actor at all, to then go in and do that and play. I mean, obviously he's a boxer, so I mean he's playing a boxer, but still he's really convincing in his performance, and it's just an awesome storyline, and it's played so well. And that was one of those movies that like our viewing of it was really special because there was only a few people in the theater, so it's always kind of a more intimate feel where you only have maybe 2 or 3 other groups of people in a whole big theater to watch a movie. You know, the Rocky series holds close significance for both of us, and it was good enough that when I was going through my movies that were all ranked, very, very close together, it was enough that Rocky Balboa snuck in there as my number 5 all time.
It's really an achievement that it was any good to begin with.
Right.
But that's all I really have to say.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's true. That movie would have had so many things going against it at that point to then turn around and to be what it was. Pretty tremendous.
So moving on, my number 4 is Training Day. Weirdly, probably the movie I've quoted the most in my life.
We quoted that movie today.
Yeah. And me and my older brother, it's like our jam, basically. Like, we love it. And it's because, well, Denzel Washington, it was an amazing role. Like, he's done more important roles, obviously, in his life. But I don't think he's done a role quite as fun. Like, he's just so fun. And some people say, oh, he won the Oscar for this just because they wanted to give him one because he should have won before. Which could be true, but I think it's important that a performance be really fun. It doesn't always have to be the most important one or, like,
Right.
And he did a really good job as a corrupt cop with a lot of attitude. And that's basically what Training Day is. Quotable, fun, and full of attitude. Just a blast to watch. Like, you're never going to, like, I picked Stalker last. These are so completely different. You're never going to sit and watch Training Day and be like, geez, that really made me think. Yeah. You're going to think, no. You're going to be like, King Kong ain't gonna shit on me.
Nothing.
Sorry.
The worst instance of censorship in the history of movies.
Like so many like, I'm surgical with this bitch, Jake. And Denzel just... he just launches into him, and it's a cool little story full of some interesting twists and turns and stuff. So for years, I never really considered Training Day one of my top 5s. Mm-hmm. But while making this list, I was like, it has to be because I could put that on every day and just watch it. So that's why Training Day is number 4 for me.
Nice, and that was 2001. So I mean, you would have seen that when we were still in high school.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's one of those movies that obviously has stuck with you for a very, very long time.
I've seen it quite a few times. I don't rewatch movies that often, but I've rewatched Training Day a whole bunch of times.
Nice. Like, I liked it, and I remember liking it. I hesitate whether I would like it as much now, or maybe I'd like it more now, because I mean, look, I remember seeing that. I don't think I saw it like when it was out, but I saw it, I think maybe in university was maybe the first time that I saw it. No, maybe it was back in this. Anyways, I knew I was like, oh man, this movie's great. But like, I kind of thought that everything was great because I didn't really know any better. So now I would be interested to watch that again with my quote unquote critical eye and see how I react to it now.
Yeah, I could see it not being as good to you now, and it's definitely not as good to you as it is to me.
Right.
And I think most people will not put this in their top 5 list. Now, mind you, there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of movies, so any movie we mention might not have a good chance of being in there. So I don't think many people would put Training Day in there besides me and my brother.
Right. Maybe not.
Like, we adore it so much. Right. And there's a lot of people that really like it, but I'm not sure you wouldn't really expect it top 5 material, I don't think.
My number 4 best movie of all time is one that for a long time I considered to be the greatest movie that I had ever seen, and it may even still be from all aspects, like technical and whatever, from all aspects, may like quote unquote objectively be the best thing I've ever seen, but it's not number 1 on the list for a number of reasons. It's Inception, and I remember when I first saw Inception, how just mind-bending that movie was. Because it was that and like Shutter Island. I remember being like, oh my god, Shutter Island, what an incredible movie. And then Inception came along and I was like, holy shit! Inception, I think, is just one of those movies that it stuck with me so long after I watched it. And I remember, because I was working at Blockbuster at the time, when that DVD was coming out, because this is like right at the sort of the tail end of Blockbuster, they sent us some of those spinners. That he uses in the movie, and they sent us those as just like we were just literally just supposed to have them out on the desk, whatever. And that was like the only I would say souvenir that I took from the closing of Blockbuster Canada was I took one of those spinners, and I still have it upstairs, just to make sure that I'm not in one of the dream worlds. But that movie just so blew me away at the time, and for years and years afterwards I was like, oh my god, this is so good. Now I haven't watched it in a few years, so maybe it's dulled on me a little bit, but just for the incredible impact that it had on me when I first watched it, and for a number of years after that. Inception, it still sits inside the top 5. It's not way up at the top anymore. Sits at number 4.
That was almost Nolan peak, really, because it was really intelligent, a hell of a lot of fun, especially the first time.
Yes.
Now, I don't think I'd want to watch it again, but that first time it's really brilliant. It also had intelligent fight sequences.
Yeah, the whole sequence in like what basically looks like a James Bond snow level, like that whole sequence in that dream state is so incredibly, and I mean, like, I love Ellen Page. Like, anytime she's on screen, I'm just like, I love you, you're great. And Leo is so good, obviously, and Tom Hardy is good, and yeah, so I mean, like, just performance almost, I hesitate to use this because I overuse the phrase a little bit too much, but performance pornography, because everyone in that movie is so incredible. But yeah, the fight sequences, like you mentioned, are really like immaculately choreographed.
Yeah, no, I don't. Now, it's been a long time since I've seen it, and I only saw it the once. But I don't know how much action was actually in it. So could we call it an action movie?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because my point is, it's cool to see an action movie with a brain. And I don't know if you classify it as an action movie, because I can't really remember just how much action was actually in it. Yeah,
I don't know if you call that an action movie or you call it like a suspense.
Not really elements thriller.
Of yeah, it did. Yeah, it touched on it.
But it's nice when you get something like that. That's some really cool action sequences, but then also has a brain, because
sci-fi drama.
Yeah.
It's a melange. It's a mix of all things.
It's an excellent movie. It's probably in like my second tier, third tier of movies. Okay, and my number 3 is staying on the Nolan kick. I'm going with The Dark Knight. So depending on who you are when you're watching this, you either think, oh, they're so overrated, or hell yeah. Because that's one of those movies, kind of like a Final Fantasy VII game, in case you don't know it's a game.
Right.
It's so beloved that it's kind of overrated by default.
But
But then it deserves it. So that's how I view The Dark Knight. And The Dark Knight holds up, because I literally watched The Dark Knight last year. Because I wanted to see if it held up. I was like, I haven't seen The Dark Knight now in a few years at that point. I've seen it a few times before. And it's so brilliant. Now, this was Nolan at his peak. He perfectly, because of the way it's edited, sets the duel, basically, between Joker and Batman right in the first, 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Or however long those two scenes. And that could basically be a short film in a way, just because it hits the themes of Joker versus Batman. But even on top of that, like, I've never been as hateful towards Bale's Batman voice, although honestly at the end you kind of start to notice it a little bit. When he has long speeches, you notice that it's kind of meh, but for the most part he keeps his speech short and it's fine, and I've never really hated the Batman voice. And as Bruce Wayne, he's excellent. You have great performances. Some people would argue that, Two-Face wasn't necessary, and it would have been nice to have Two-Face maybe in another movie, but I actually thought it was kind of cool. It added a nice little counterbalance to the Joker and the situation, and some people argue that Batman Begins is a better movie as a whole, and it might be. I don't know. It's a debate I kind of have with myself, because I love that trilogy so much.
Right.
That I'm kind of representing that trilogy with one movie. They argue it's not really a good Batman movie, or you can't say it's such a great movie because it has one really good performance. And I've never understood that. They're like, it's not the movie that it is without the Joker. I'm like, yeah, but the Joker's in that.
Right. Yeah,
so why are you detracting from the movie because the Joker's one part of it that's really good?
It's like saying Scarface wouldn't nearly be the same movie without Tony Montana. Well, Tony Montana's in the movie.
Yeah, he's in it, so it only adds to the experience.
Absolutely.
So I've never understood it.
I don't know.
If you take that out of the movie, then it's not the same movie. It's not as good. Yeah,
right.
Like any great performance.
Because you just took the main villain away.
Why'd you take Rocky out of Rocky?
Yeah, it's true. That's another great example.
But anyway, it's a great movie, and there's criticisms you could make. You could say that Two-Face was done a little dirty, and I agree he kind of was, but not enough that I was like deeply offended by it.
No.
So I think it's still, to this day, an excellent movie. So that's my number 3.
One thing that I will point out about that movie, the scene with the Joker when he like basically makes his introduction to the table full of gangsters, that scene is so... Like, that's one of my favorite movie scenes of all time. Because he just walks in, says his piece, and then the other guy's just like, give me one reason why I shouldn't have my boy here pull your head off. That whole scene is just so well done. And like you said, probably Nolan at his absolute peak and his absolute best. You couldn't duplicate that if you tried. Like, it was its own unique kind of thing, and so incredibly well done. My number 3 is a movie that I debated whether this movie or its predecessor would be the one that I would choose to take this spot. I didn't feel fair giving them both a spot, because I mean, look, this is only top 5. It's like I can't justify having a movie and its sequel be in the top 5. So I felt like, and this is one of those decisions where it's like you're choosing between your children and which one of them do you love just that little bit much more. So my number 3 is Clerks 2. And I had to take Clerks 2 over Clerks just because Clerks 2, in comparison to Clerks, and I mean, obviously, it's like it's almost unfair to say it like this because they were, 13 years apart? I mean, Clerks 2, it looks so much better, and it's, I would argue, written a little bit better, and it's a reflection of the fact that the writer and director had 13 years of experience between the two movies, so it's like, it's unfair to be like, man, Clerks looks so amateurish compared to Clerks 2. Like, of course it does, because Clerks was filmed by an amateur. So, I mean, it's like, it almost feels unfair, but, Clerks 2 is that experience where it's almost a little bit better because of the fact that it had so many people who didn't want it to be done. Like, there was a large number of people that didn't ever want Clerks 2 to exist. Because it was just like, no, if you do a sequel to Clerks, it diminishes Clerks, and Clerks is my favorite movie, and da-da-da-da. Nobody... And I'm gonna say this is my gauntlet being thrown down 12 years later. This is my gauntlet being thrown down. Nobody can watch Clerks 2 and say that Clerks 2 shouldn't have been done. Even if you wanted the movie to be done, didn't want the movie to be done, it needed to be done because it needed to continue that story. And does a Clerks 3 need to be done? I'd like to see one. I don't necessarily think that a Clerks 3 needs to happen, but Clerks 2 needed to happen because you needed to see the evolution of those characters and of Smith himself from, early 20s, mid-20s to mid-30s, and the way that a man's life or just a person's life changes, their perspective changes between the mid-20s and the mid-30s. It's weird to call it a coming of age because they're not young kids, but it is still a coming of age because they're kind of have the mentality of young kids. So it is kind of a coming of age, and it's, I would argue, probably Kevin Smith's best movie aside from maybe Red State. Another movie that have I cried at all 3? I didn't cry in Inception, but I cried in Rocky Balboa, and I did cry in Clerks 2. So Clerks 2 is my number 3.
Yeah, I'm not going to get too personal, but there was a part in that movie that affected me because of where I was in my life, and I kind of related to something. But yeah, Clerks 2 is wonderful.
Was it the donkey show?
Yeah.
Deeply.
Not on camera. I love Clerks too. We're both big Kevin Smith fans. You clearly love Clerks a little more than me, but I love Clerks. Clerks is on that second tier of movies that may not be in my top, even maybe not my top 10, but it's right there.
Right.
It's right there. I love Clerks, and they're interesting movies because Clerks 1 is funnier. Clerks 2 has more heart. I think if I was to pick one, I would go with Clerks 2 because of the heart, because it affected me. But there is a problem with Clerks 2. I actually think the donkey part goes on a little too long and isn't as funny as Smith thinks.
Okay.
But I still think the movie as a whole is one of the best comedies ever, and Clerks 1, one of the best comedies ever. So I also love Clerks, so that's an excellent pick, even though it doesn't make mine.
Right.
All right, my number 2 is a movie that he mentioned earlier, Rocky Balboa.
Oh, damn!
The greatest movie in the greatest series ever. I love Rocky so much. One of my emails was Rocky Fanatic 17 way back in the day, which I should have kept it because I should have stuck with it.
It's probably still there.
Everything he says is true. The only thing I'll add is that what's really lovely about Rocky Balboa is that obviously Rocky is aging and he's like, I got stuff in the basement, I gotta get this out, I'm getting older, I still got this stuff I want to do. You can kind of liken that to Stallone himself, because Stallone was getting older, and it's it felt really personal. And because he's been this character for so long, and it was probably his most iconic role. I mean, some people think like Rambo and stuff, which fine, but I think Rocky is his most iconic role, and nobody else could have played Rocky like he did. And to see him get older, go through all that stuff, it just felt so deeply personal to him, and it shone through. And yeah, I won't go on too much about it because you already hit the nail on the head with everything. So Rocky Balboa is fantastic, and my number 2.
It's kind of interesting too that like Stallone can portray that kind of like, oh my God, I'm getting older through himself. And then he also portrays it through Paulie.
Yeah.
Because Paulie gets spoilers, gets laid off from his job, and it's just like, since when do they give guys who retired meat instead of watches, Paulie? And he's like, I already got a watch. Like, he's just like, and he's so like emotionally overcome by it and everything. So he can portray that through 2 different characters, because that's what a master Sylvester Stallone is inside this Rocky universe.
Yeah.
And that's also ties into why that's Rocky over Rambo is probably, like you say, his most iconic.
Yeah, I blubber so much during that movie. I watched it with my family once, and I'm sitting in front of them.
Right.
And I was so thankful for that, because I'm just laying there, I think even on the floor, just like, but they couldn't see me because they're all behind me. I'm like, yeah.
My number 2 is actually, it makes me even happier that I picked this as my number 2, because like the last movie, it wasn't one that he thought was going to be on my list, and I'm pretty sure this one is also not one that he thinks is going to be on my list. Yeah. And that's always nice, because we like to one-up each other. Well, not really one-up each other, I guess, but we like to surprise each other in lists like this. And stuff that comes out of left field is always more special. My number 2 is my favorite movie from arguably my favorite director, Stanley Kubrick, Full Metal Jacket. It was one of the first times, when I first saw that movie, it was one of the first times I feel like I experienced that 2 movies in one kind of thing, because you have the movie of all of these recruits before they get to war, and then you have the second movie, which is once they're there. And it was the first time I sort of got that experience, and it was one of the first times that I remember really looking at a movie critically, because I had to analyze the movie critically for university. And that was like one of my first exposures to it. And I watched it. I did that thing that you're supposed to do, like with books and really with everything. The first time you experience it, you're supposed to experience it for pleasure. And then the second time you experience it is when you're really supposed to go in and especially with books, go in and analyze and look for themes and everything like that. So, like, the first time I watched it, I was like, wow, I really enjoyed this movie. Like, this was a really good movie. And the second time I watched it, you really, like, you pause it and you slow things down and you're just really trying to analyze everything about the movie. And that was when I really fell in love with Kubrick, because that's when I really took note of the things that he did as a director. And so, even if I didn't love the movie, it would be significant in my critical movie life. There was so much about that movie that even after I had gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, I was just like, I just plain enjoy this scene. I just plain enjoy this character. I just plain love the way that the sergeant just dresses these guys, goes up one side of these guys and down the other, and he's so incredible, and these characters are so incredible, and this is so immaculately directed, and I love the messaging inside this movie. And Full Metal Jacket is one of the first movies that I remember critically falling in love with. So Full Metal Jacket is my number 2.
I'm a 2001 guy myself when it comes to Kubrick, but I love Full Metal Jacket. I have a box set of his movies, and that's one of the movies. It's probably my 3rd favorite Kubrick.
Okay.
But yeah, that's an excellent choice. I didn't see that coming though.
Right.
Because
exactly.
Because I knew you loved that movie. I think you actually talked about it earlier today. Now that I think about it, did you not? I think you mentioned it.
I think I might have. Yeah.
And yeah, that's a great movie. I'll just leave it at that because it's your boy.
Exactly.
My number 1 might be a little boring for him, but probably not for anybody watching because no one really ever talks about this movie. But my number 1 is Gummo. I'm using this movie to represent my favorite director, Harmony Korine, because there's really a couple movies of his, Spring Breakers especially, that could have also been number 1, but I don't want number 1, Harmony Korine, number 2, Harmony Korine, number 3. So he makes the best movies that aren't Rocky.
Right.
Basically, is how I feel about him. Gummo is a weird one for me to pick, only because I don't actually like talking about Gummo. What I like to do is I like to just look at somebody and say, hey, have you ever seen Gummo? And they're like, no, because it made $6,000 or something.
Right.
Last time I checked Box Office Mojo, it made no money.
Right.
And I go, you should watch it. And they're always kind of like, why? And I'm like, just watch it. And the only thing I'll ever say is it's unlike anything you've ever seen. And then people watch it, and I've shown it to quite a few people, and they either despise it, or they love it. They think but they always think it's weird. For example, I lived with some people, and they finally watched it with me. One guy had basically a mental breakdown, wondering, should I feel bad for these guys or what? And then my ex was just like, that's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life.
And that's why she's his ex.
Yeah, that's why she's my ex. I love that. So I don't like to give plot away, not that there really is much of one. I just think Gummo is a brilliant movie, and a lot of people will be like, oh, it's just kind of schlocky because he films it differently. But Korine knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He makes good scenes. They're just challenging and unconventional. So Gummo is just... It's been my favorite movie since I saw it, and I've already said too much about it, but that would be kind of weird if I was like, my number 1 is Gummo. Okay, next.
How about you? Yeah.
But really, I just recommend, if you've seen it and you like it and you want to give it to someone else, don't even tell them anything about it. And also, it has one of the most disgusting scenes of all time in any movie.
Right.
Just ever. And it's not even like a horror movie, so don't go thinking it's like some torture porn, gross shit. No. It's just, there's a scene, and it's just real disgusting. And you'll know the one when you see it because everyone knows the one when they see it. Right. Every single person that I've ever talked to.
Everybody knows it.
But yeah, the number 1 is Gummo, which you probably could have guessed.
I think going into this, if I was like, I'm going to guess your number 1, I probably would have said Gummo.
Yeah.
You know the great thing about that, though, is you, on camera, you just said, like, I've shown this to people, I've shown this. You and I have never sat down together and watched Gummo.
Hey, maybe we should.
In the 25 years that we've been
I can't remember. Have you seen Gummo?
I know.
Oh, we're watching Gummo.
Yeah, we're going to have to watch Gummo.
We're watching it.
Shut off the recording.
I'm right excited.
So now we're in a really interesting spot because it's time for my number 1. And I think my number 3 and my number 2 were not ones that you thought were going to be in my top 3. So
Clerks,
now,
I should have known with Clerks.
With Clerks, you probably should have known.
I don't know. That was just a blind spot.
Right. But now I feel like I've got you in a position where you're flipping a coin. Because you're like, it could be this, or it could be this. Like, I feel like there's like a couple that you're thinking like, hey, it might be. If you are doing it, I'm not saying you're doing that, but if you are doing that, you're probably overthinking things. My number one best movie of all time is The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
Yeah, that's the one I thought.
That's the one you thought?
Yeah.
Exactly. So
I'm actually surprised The Dark Knight isn't on this.
well, you know what? And you know what? If we would have done honorable mentions, it probably would have been in there. I'm a Lord of the Rings kid. I was a Lord of the Rings kid from like the first second of Fellowship of the Ring. I was like, you have me for whatever you want to give me. Now then, of course, Peter Jackson turned around and gave us 3 Hobbit movies that should have been 2.
Could have been 1.
Maybe
that book
it
does
could have
not
been-
deserve more than 1.
But like that could have been a really in the Peter Jackson in the Jacksonian style.
All right.
The Hobbit, The Hobbit could have been 2 really dope 3-hour movies, but instead they were 1 pretty good 3-hour movie and 2 mediocre 3-hour movies. Return of the King, however, is a tremendous movie from the beginning all the way through to the end, where people can rag on Fellowship of the Ring for being slow, and I think that's a legitimate criticism about that movie. The Two Towers for being probably the weakest of those 3 movies, aside from Helm's Deep. Now, admittedly, Helm's Deep is like half of that movie, but I think Two Towers is probably the weakest of those 3 movies. Man, Return of the King, for a Lord of the Rings fan, it's not just because it's the capping of the trilogy. I mean, that obviously plays a role. But just the way that movie is made, it's the best made of the 3 movies. It has the best storyline of the 3 movies, the best performances of the 3 movies. The ending goes on a little bit long. I mean, like, you know, Clerks 2 makes the joke about how, like, that movie has, like, 19 different endings, which is true. It's absolutely true, and I think you probably could have condensed some of those, but, I mean, you got to keep that runtime up there. So, I mean, like, it's an imperfect movie, even though I get rated at 100, which I basically call a perfect movie.
Well, now you can give something 100 and it can still have flaws, because there's nothing perfect in this world.
I also rated The Wrestler 100, and I would definitely not rate it 100 anymore.
Yeah.
But, like, man, that movie is a gut punch. That is the 3rd of the 5 movies that I cried in. So I'm apparently just a big blubberer. Everything about that movie is, I would argue, the best of the 3 movies. And I couldn't have asked for anything more in the capping of that trilogy and just that movie in and of itself. Return of the King, my number 1 best movie of all time.
I'd love to take a million rabbit poops on your pick, but I can't because I've never seen it. I've seen the first 2, and I actually thought they got better.
Okay, hang on. And this is not, I'm not going to attack you for this.
Yes,
but
you are.
I haven't seen your number 1, and you haven't seen mine.
Don't do this. I don't want to see you.
Ooh.
I don't want to see it.
This is a video idea in and of itself, and we'll have to update you on that. But anyways,
All right, we'll do that. We'll do it.
I'll
I'll watch Return of the King at some point. But it's weird because I don't dislike the Two Towers. I dislike the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I dislike Fellowship so much. But Two Towers had some like cool fight scenes and stuff. But at least I enjoyed that part. And then I think it was even you and quite a few other people would tell me that, yo, you should watch Return of the King because it has the cool fight scenes and stuff. So even if you don't like the rest of it, then you'll like the fight scenes. So really, I've kind of been meaning to watch it, but I just think, it's Lord of the Rings.
It's Lord of the Rings is a commitment.
I just can't.
Right?
But I'll have to do it now.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for the debut episode of Weekly Top 5's from Library Chess Productions. Like, comment, subscribe, follow us here, and we'll see you next week.